This is David Acton, Curator of Photographs at the Snite Museum of Art of the University of Notre Dame, here with some ideas and observations on our exhibition's Touchstones of the 20th Century. Today I want to consider a pair of contemporary photographers who have both photographed animals and their relationships to human beings using very different techniques and producing images with distinctively different outlooks. Gary Winogrand was born in the Bronx in 1929 to a working-class Jewish family, and he grew up in the city. He joined the Army as a way to get out of high school a little early and was trained as a weather forecaster. He was stationed in Georgia and learned photography during the late 1940s. When he was discharged in 1947, Winogrand returned to New York and began to study art as a GI Bill student, first at City College and then Columbia University. He was focused on painting when he discovered that the Columbia darkroom was open all night. This gave him a chance to photograph during the day and work in the darkroom, often by himself during the nighttime hours, and this suited his personality and his creative rhythm. During this period, Winogrand took a class from Alexei Brodovich at the New School of Social Research, and he was influenced by Brodovich's preference for intuition and immediacy in photography as opposed to technical perfection and efficiency. The artist began the career of a professional photographer in New York, photographing athletics at boxing clubs and dance studios, and publishing these images in books and magazines whenever possible. Two of his motion photographs were included in Edward Steichen's exhibition The Family of Man at the Museum of Modern Art in 1955. And during this period, Winogrand tried to set himself up as a commercial photographer, but he found that he was most inspired by working on the street. Often Winogrand would spend time working on the street in New York City with his friend Joel Meyerowitz. And this is an example of the sort of photographs he took at that time. Images confronting the people of New York in such a way that their thoughts and personalities are revealed. Many of his most famous images from this time seem to represent New Yorkers bearing down upon him with disaffection. Winogrand began to use a wide-angle lens on his miniature Leica camera and started tilting compositions in order to minimize the distortion of these lenses. Soon Winogrand was snapping hundreds of images each day, and soon he stopped looking through the viewfinder as he worked on the street. In the early 1960s, Winogrand began to visit the Central Park Zoo with his camera, photographing the people who visited the exhibits there and their reaction to the animals more than the animals themselves. In this photograph, for example, a spider monkey behind glass is teased and taunted by an adult whose personality we can't understand because of the way that the photograph is cropped, and just one of his children seems to look at the monkey while the others seem lost in their own thoughts. The angled composition and juxtaposition of areas of light and dark give this image a sense of energy and dynamism. Sometimes Winogrand's photographs at the Central Park Zoo represent amusing moments of psychological confrontation between visitors and zoo animals. And very often the artist has selected a shot in which we seem to sympathize with the animal in their judgment of the people behind the bars. Winogrand took so many photographs that he witnessed extraordinary moments and extraordinary relationships of human beings and animals, such as this famous photograph of a young couple with their two pet chimpanzees. The facial features of all the subjects of this photograph and the psychology between them and among them are provocative and fascinating. In the aquarium at the Central Park Zoo, Winogrand made several fascinating photographs that invite us to occupy the underwater spaces of the animals as opposed to their human observers, such as this wonderful moment where a zookeeper cleans the glass in the underwater aquarium occupied by a pair of beluga whales, and the tiny dot of the whale's eye in the center of the photograph, along with the slant of its mouth, projects a sense of energy, personality, and intelligence. In this photograph, which is in our exhibition, taken at the Central Park Zoo in 1964, the artist has aimed his camera at a walrus tank and a family who look through the bars for the animals swimming in the pool. The sweep of these bars give an extraordinary energy to the composition, and the father, mother, and young boy who gaze into the water, anxious to arrest the attention of the animal swimming, clearly miss the point, for the walrus has risen to look directly at the photographer and at us, as if to shrug with a comment of the stupidity of his visitors. In 1973, Winogrand moved to Austin, Texas, to begin teaching at the University of Texas, and there he made photographs of the people of Texas and their animals. The best-known series of this period are his photographs of the Fort Worth Fat Stock Show and Rodeo, and many of these photographs combine the sense of energy and movement and immediacy with observations of the relationships between animals and people. By this time, Winogrand was shooting hundreds of photographs in each outing and sorting through them to find the most remarkable images that he perhaps did not even recognize in the moment. This was his method, to make so many photographs that when he sorted through them, he found remarkable, masterful images of reality, such as this photograph of cowboys trying to control a bronc who has already dislodged his rider, or in this image of a bull chasing a rodeo clown, a photograph that seems to represent a reality that must never have existed and remind us of the photographs by Alexander Rodchenko of circuses from the 1920s and 30s, or this image of a stock fair exhibitor with his Brahma bull that expresses its affection for his master. Winogrand often captured remarkable relationships between animals and people, sometimes representing the similarities of the reaction to a moment and seemingly of the personalities of animals and people, as in this image of a boy slightly bored and his sheep waiting to go into the competition ring, or this amazing photograph of an exhibitor with her prize-winning bull who seems unimpressed with the proceedings as he stares directly at the photographer. Another photographer of this period who created an extensive body of work representing animals, particularly dogs, is Elliott Erwitt, whom we see here in a self-portrait combined with the shot of a dog sniffing around in the street. Erwitt made many famous photographs during his long career. He was born in Paris in 1928 to Russian Jewish parents, and the family immigrated to New York City in 1939. His parents separated in 1941, and he moved with his father to Hollywood, leaving his mother in New York. While he attended high school, Erwitt worked as a wedding photographer and also printed movie celebrity photographs for the film studios. After high school, he studied photography at Los Angeles City College in 1949, and then returned to New York to continue his studies at the New School for Social Research. During the Korean War, Erwitt was drafted, and he worked as a staff photographer in Europe. During this period, he sent some of his photographs representing the boring daily life of his fellow soldiers to Life magazine, where they were published in 1951. Erwitt was discharged in 1953 and returned to New York City, where he joined the Magnum Picture Agency. He became a traveling photojournalist, widely publishing his editorial photographs in magazines as he traveled around the world covering current events. Many of Erwitt's photographs, including those which became most famous, represented moments of human interest, such as this memorable image of a couple sitting in a car looking at the sunset, a photograph that encapsulates a complex story and tells it in a moment. During this period, Urwit sometimes worked as set photographer in Hollywood, including the movies On the Waterfront in 1954 and The 7-Year Itch in 1955, when he made this and several other famous photographs of Marilyn Monroe standing on a subway grate. In 1959, Urwit traveled with Vice President Richard Nixon to Moscow and made this famous photograph of the so-called kitchen debate with Nikita Khrushchev and the Soviet Trade Fair. When standing in an exhibit of an American kitchen presented by Macy's, Nixon seems forcefully to lecture to Khrushchev about the superiority of American life. Urwit, of course, was fluent in Russian and was able to understand the comments that Khrushchev made to his aides following this moment, which of course Nixon himself could not understand. Urwit was among the hundreds of photographers covering the funeral of President John F. Kennedy in Washington in 1963, and it was he who captured what is remembered as one of the most revealing moments of that event. This image of the First Lady carrying the flag from the president's coffin with all of her emotion apparent beneath the veil. In 1964, Newsweek magazine sent Urwit to Cuba, where he spent time with the young revolutionaries and made remarkable and memorable photographs of Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, including this portrait which humanizes the young revolutionary who was so demonized at the time in the American press. During all of these years, wherever he went, Elliott Urwit photographed dogs. He found them in every country and every culture and found that he had the same sympathy toward them wherever he went. And so he made photographs often in his own time, like this image in New York City where a Chihuahua seems to pant in the heat of his sweater, or this image of two dogs who seem to taunt each other at play, or this family portrait where a pug exerts his domination over the group. Many of Urwit's photographs concentrate on the dog as an expressive personality, very often one separated from the human beings with whom it lives its life. Urwit made so many photographs of dogs that he was able to publish several photo books, which were popular and remain so, including Son of a Bitch and Woof. Here's an image from the 1980s representing the dilemma of a young mother poised between the energetic insistence of a dog and the reluctance of her son, an image that symbolizes the difficulty and precariousness of family life. Many of Urwit's photographs of dogs crop away the upper half of a human being while allowing the dog to look directly at the camera, so that the human being becomes a prop for lives lived on a lower level, like the wartime Tom and Jerry cartoons. We can only imagine the reaction of this woman to the loving attentions of a bulldog, and we relate to the perilous experiences of these chihuahuas at a dog show. This is the photograph in our exhibition, taken in South Carolina in 1962, representing a farmer and his faithful hound dog who confront the photographer on a sunny roadside. The way that the two partners both shield their eyes from the bright sunshine and the looks on their faces give a sense of their close relationship. And this identification goes further when one notices the lanyard around the farmer's neck, which seems to lead down to the label on his overalls, just as his dog's collar carries its tags. And both of them have discolored modeling on their chests that reflects the seriousness of their work. Nevertheless, their expressions are friendly, if guarded. In this photograph of hunting dogs taken in Scotland, you get a sense of a gang of several mischievous personalities that can be trouble when they're together. Many of Urwitz's photographs of dogs taken around the world represent the animals as they seem to pursue their private lives, like this terrier who is off on his own on an important mission, or this unfortunate chihuahua dwarfed by his mistress and her other pet, or this portrait of a dog in the park with a stick, inviting, indeed begging you to join him in his game. This is David Acton, Curator of Photographs at the Snipe Museum of Art. Thanks for joining us, and please do so again for more comments on photographs from our exhibition, Touchstones of the 20th Century.